will be able to speak. In order to do so, you have to raise your hand, and we ask you to do that using the raise your hand icon at the bottom right of your screen. And then if you're calling in from the phone, you can press *3 to raise your hand, and we'll unmute you once again in the order of which it was received. Next slide, please. And then again, just to point you to the Q&A box, if you use the 3 dots on the bottom right of your screen, you can find the Q&A section of the meeting. There's where we ask you to send any questions and comments. Feel free at any point during the meeting to send them, and we'll address them at the end of the meeting during the question and comment period. Back to you, Jamie.
Great, thank you so much, Peyton. So I'll go through our agenda for the evening. I'll give a brief introduction of the project team and provide an overview of the project. We'll go through existing conditions on the New York Avenue Street corridor. Then we'll go through 2 design alternatives, one that was developed in 2017, and then our updated design alternative. We'll then evaluate both of those alternatives side by side. I'll go through next steps of the project, and then we'll get into questions and comments. So as I mentioned, I'm Jamie Ernst. I'm a transportation planner with DDOT, and I am the project manager. We also have Ed Stoloff on the call.
Yes, Ed Stoloff, and I'm manager of the project planning branch. Thank you for being here.
We also have Chris Conroy with Jacobs, who is our project manager on the consulting team, and Carolyn Washburn, who is the environmental lead from Jacobs from the consulting team. And they will be speaking to you shortly in the project. So I'll now provide an overview. Our study area runs along New York Avenue Northeast from Florida Avenue to Bladensburg. It's approximately 1.85 miles long and spans through Ward 5 and 6. The red outline on the right of the screen shows the adjacent bike infrastructure to the project area. So our objectives today are to review the scope of the study and review the 2017 design and present an updated concept for 2023. We will take your, and then we'll provide an overview of the alternatives, and I'll present the next steps. We will take your comments at this meeting, but through Title VI or through the chat box or by raising your hand. We also will be taking comments until August 15th, and you can do that via the project email, which is on the project website, and I will show at the end of this presentation. So the overall goal of the study is to develop improvements to pedestrian and bike infrastructure along the 1.85 miles of New York Avenue. That infrastructure will provide connections to existing bike and pedestrian infrastructure along the corridor in order to facilitate connections to commercial, recreational, and residential destinations. So we recognize that this effort began in 2017, and a concept alternative was developed at that time. That concept consists of a separated raised cycle track that's 10 feet wide, a 4-foot planting strip separating that from a 6-foot sidewalk, and a 6 to 8 foot planting strip separating those facilities from the travel lane. And this would be on the north side of New York Avenue. For context, that concept was developed 6 years ago. So there are aspects of the corridor that have changed. There's new infrastructure in the corridor, and we have more information about ongoing projects in the area. That presents a couple challenges that I've outlined here. Notably, this design was tied with the Virginia Railway Express midday storage facility project. That project was to construct a retaining wall that's necessary to get the width that we need for this design. This project with VRE has been significantly delayed, and because the schedule of that project is tied to this design alternative, that in turn delays the schedule and implementation of this project. That design also would impact a large number of properties along the corridor and require significant right-of-way acquisition, which also adds to the project cost and the project schedule. Due to these challenges, we developed a design alternative to address some of those impacts. So this is just a brief overview of the 2023 design. Chris will go into more detail later on in the presentation, but the general layout of this concept is a 10-foot shared use facility on both sides of Newark Avenue on the north and the south. There's a typical 6-foot planting strip, which would separate the shared use facility from the vehicular traffic lanes. Along New York Avenue, there are various obstructions existing now on the sidewalk, particularly with light poles. So those light posts would be relocated into the 6-foot planting strip. And this design would also align with the recently constructed bicycle facilities in the project area, which I will go into in a moment. We'll now take a look at the existing conditions along the corridor. The photos show just an example of what the corridor currently looks like. There are areas of very narrow sidewalks, about 3 to 4 feet. Here's an example of one adjacent to the red carpet inn. The sidewalk is frequently obstructed by tree boxes and by light poles, as you can see in the photos by the Brentwood Maintenance Facility and the 9th Street Bridge. There are also several sections of the corridor that are missing sidewalks entirely. And as we move east down New York Avenue, these issues persist with missing sidewalks, as you can see on Fenwick and 16th, tree box obstructions, and then narrow sidewalks on Montana as well. So the goal of both of these concept alternatives is to address the sidewalk continuity issues. So we looked at the changes to the existing bike network since the 2017 study, and we've highlighted those improvements here. In 2019, there was a sidewalk expansion when the Target was built on New York Avenue. And we now have, also in 2019, there was an on-street bike facility built on Florida Avenue Northeast. In 2020, an additional on-street bike facility was built on Brentwood Parkway. And again, in 2021, we now have an on-street bike facility on West Virginia Avenue. And all of these new bike infrastructure will connect to New York Avenue. You can also see in the dashed green line, these are planned bike routes, one on Mount Olivet Road and one on Bladensburg Road Northeast. So I'll now have Chris go into more detail on both the design alternatives.
Thank you, Jamie. So I will go through the alternative one, which is again revisiting the 2017 design, as Jamie alluded to, followed that by the alternative 2, which is the updated design presenting here. Going back to 2017, as Jamie mentioned before, the outcome of that study was a separated bike trail north side of New York Avenue, separate from a 6 to 10 foot wide sidewalk. Both of those separated from the vehicle lanes by 6 foot planted buffer. On the south side of New York Avenue would be a 10 to 16 foot sidewalk with a 6 foot planted buffer. Very similar to the cross section that was, as Jamie pointed out in the last slide, just constructed outside of new Target in 2020, I think. Planting spaces would have provided a buffer between the vehicle and pedestrian lanes, and in addition provided space for green space and tree cover, which would significantly improve. Next slide, thank you. As Jamie mentioned, there are challenges associated with that design. With this slide, what we're showing is really one of the biggest challenges. On the north side of New York Avenue, we are the additional width necessary from the curb out to the edge of the 10-foot separated bike trail is about 30 feet. And so we would need to provide an additional 21-foot width outside of the existing barrier there, as shown on this image. It's an area of poor ground conditions, and so that would be a significant retaining wall. That was intended originally to be implemented through part of the VRE project that is still in planning in the rail yard here. That project has been delayed significantly, and so we're looking at alternatives now that would allow us to move forward with improvements on New York Avenue, irrespective of what happens with that project. Next slide, thank you. So that's where we move into alternative 2, which is our 2023 updated design. Next slide. To begin with, we did a similar exercise that was done back in 2017, and Jamie has already pointed out some of these improvements that have been done within the project study area, particularly Brentwood Parkway and West Virginia Avenue, and upcoming projects that are in the planning phases already within DDOT on Mount Olivet and Bladensburg Road. And what we're left with is really the improvements that we're showing in the blue lines along New York Avenue, connecting to Brentwood Parkway and connecting over to the Arboretum via Montana Avenue over on the east side of the project study area. Next slide. Over the course of the next, I think, 5 slides, I'll walk through what our proposed improvements are over the length of the project corridor of New York Avenue. On the map on the top left, shown in yellow, are the same improvements that were just shown on the last slide. And in the bottom right is a 3D rendering of what those improvements might look like. This first slide covers the segment of the corridor between New York Avenue Bridge up to the 4th Street, just by Union Market. On the north side of New York Avenue, we would intend to keep the existing retaining wall that was constructed back in 2010, I think it was. That was recently laid with concrete to create a 6-foot sidewalk in that space. There is space in there to increase the width of that sidewalk to create a 10-foot shared use facility. And we will be providing a safety railing between that and the vehicle lanes to provide safety and comfort for users of that shared use facility. On the south side, we will be proposing a 10-foot shared use facility with a 6-foot planting strip between that facility and the vehicle lanes. Next slide, thank you. Moving further east along the corridor between 4th Street and 9th Street, very similar to the previous slide, 10-foot shared use facility on the north side and 10-foot shared use facility on the south side. One thing that we're looking at that is highlighted here in the bullets on the left is we're considering looking at an additional crosswalk in the area just to the east of 4th Street, adjacent to the hotel on the north side. Considering the use of a hawk signal, which is similar to some the district DDOT are doing at other similar locations in the district. And so this is something we would seek comment and feedback on as to whether that's appropriate and useful in this location. It's quite a long distance between 4th Street and Brentwood Parkway, which would be the next crossing to the east, where there are currently no crossings. So this would try and resolve some of that issue. Next slide. Moving between 9th Street and Fairview Avenue, again, very similar to the previous slide. We've got a pinch point in right-of-way here. So on the north side, there will be a small length that will be reduced to 8 feet wide, but in general, it'd be 8 to 10. It will be up to 10 feet wide over this segment. And on the south side, again, we're retaining the 10-foot shared use facility. There is an existing concrete median east of 9th Street Bridge, really quite wide and bland of any planting or green space. And so there is a potential opportunity which we're looking into for creating additional green space in that area. Next slide, thank you. Keeping moving east between Fairview Avenue and 16th Street. Again, 10-foot shared use facility on the north side and 10-foot shared use facility on the south side. The big difference now moving east beyond Fairview Avenue compared to west of Fairview Avenue is that we have now space to introduce a planted buffer on the north side between the 10-foot trail and the vehicle lanes. On the south side, that 10-foot shared use facility that we're proposing would tie into the existing improvements that have been already constructed outside Hector Warehouse and Target that we touched on earlier. I'm moving to the next slide. This is the final segment along New York Avenue between 16th Street and Bladensburg Road. Very similar to the previous segment, 10-foot on the north side, 10-foot shared use facility on the south side. Again, relocating conflicting lighting posts and signals into those 6-foot planting strips to eliminate all of those conflicts with pedestrians using those facilities. One item to point out here that I think was talked about during the prior study are conflict points with existing driveways and intersections, particularly in this area where there's a large number of gas stations. We will be looking to do use different types of pavement, colors of pavement, elevation to make clear to vehicle users of those driveways that there is a continuation of a trail in these areas, and try and improve some of the safety of those crossings for users of the facility. Next slide. As we mentioned earlier, New York Avenue is, as it is today, is really quite barren of any green space and any tree plantings. One of the true benefits of this project will be the significant creation of additional planting strips, 6-foot wide planting strips, which would allow for additional green space, and then tree planting along the full length of the project corridor. There's a little graph chart on the top right hand corner here, just shows the numbers of trees that we could potentially add throughout this corridor, which is really quite significant. Next slide, thank you. So on this slide, I'm going to hand back to Jamie, and she's going to talk through the evaluation of the alternatives.
Great, thank you, Chris. So this slide shows a direct comparison of both alternatives and talks through many of the points that we've already mentioned. Essentially, there are trade-offs for both alternatives. So the first alternative is a separate bike and pedestrian facility, but as we mentioned, the implementation of that project is tied to VRE's storage construction project. So the timeline there is uncertain. It also has a significant amount of right-of-way acquisition to get the full width of both facilities, and that also adds more complexity to the project, and it also increases the cost and the schedule. Alternative 2, which is a shared use facility, though it's a smaller scale project, only requires 2 property acquisitions, which lowers the cost of the project and decreases the schedule. But we will be taking comment on both alternatives prior to making a decision and moving forward with the project. So we'd like to hear your comments on both designs. I'll now go through the next steps. So we talked to ANCs in the corridor in June. We're now holding our virtual public meeting. We'll get your comments here, but we'll also continue to take your comments through August 15th. We'll review those comments in the fall and use that to inform our preferred design alternative. So one way I've mentioned that you can provide your comments to us is through the Title VI form. It's very important that we receive comments in this way because DDOT receives federal assistance. It's important that we're in compliance with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. And there are several ways to access this form. You can use the link at the top of this slide. And on the next page, we have a QR code. I'll leave it here for a moment in case you'd like to take a picture to access the Title VI slide that way. Additionally, when you close out of this meeting, you'll be prompted to a window that will also lead you to the Title VI form. So we'll now take questions and comments from you. Peyton?
Thank you, Jamie. So we do have a few questions and comments coming through in the Q&A section, so we'll start there, and I do see a few hands being raised, so we'll get to you shortly. So the first question, Jamie, is there any plan to directly connect the new trail facilities to the MBT, Metro Branch Trail?
So on the north side, since 2017, a park was Althea Tanner Park was constructed, And so there are connections from New York Avenue to the Met Branch Trail on the north side through that park. On the south side, there are significant ADA accessibility issues. There is a stairway and there's the potential to build a chairlift, but there are maintenance questions around that. So the connectivity at this point is on the north side through the park.
Thank you. And then a similar question is, are there any plans to connect the trail facilities to the existing 4th Street protected bike lanes in Union Market?
At this point in the project, we don't have that direct connection, no.
Okay. And then is a high intensity crosswalk signal across 6 lanes of traffic actually safe?
So we haven't decided to put a hawk signal there yet. That requires some testing and questions with other members of DDOT. So we haven't made that decision yet. That's just an option we're considering.
Okay, great. And I'll get back to the Q&A box. Right now, I do have an attendee with their hand raised. So Mr. Goodman, I see you. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you so we should be able to hear you. I'm sorry, Commissioner Goodman. You should be able to talk now.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And thank you for presenting. Tony Goodman, I am the ANC Commissioner for 6C07, which includes the 4th Street and M Street cycle tracks right there. The intention always has been to connect to the Met Branch Trail using the 4th Street cycle track. That is technically always been part of the New York Avenue Trail. So that's why I'm here tonight. That's why I wanted to know is how are you connecting to it? So I'd love to hear more about that. And it sounds like you don't have that yet, but certainly we will be asking as an ANC more about that because that is very, very important. Other question is about just the right-of-way on the north side. I think especially in Ivy City where it's flat, you don't have the retaining wall right there. Why is the proposal to simply continue allowing parked cars in that right-of-way? This is just a random parking lot rather than benches, art, cycle track, pump track, something that is actually useful in a park-starved area.
Chris or Carolyn, could you speak to that question?
Yeah, I can speak to that. Can you hear me? Sorry, it seems I was breaking out when I was presenting. So can you hear me more clearly now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. Yeah, so that was an area that was looked at in detail in the 2017 study, and I wouldn't say that any of that has gone away at this time. And what we're looking at really now is sort of the continuity of the improvements along the length of New York Avenue, and the additional details of you have streetscape planning, as you said, you mentioned recreation areas, that kind of thing might be something that we can look at as the project moves forwards into the next steps.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. Commissioner Goodman, do you have any other comments or questions? I see you put yourself back on mute. I'm going to lower your hand. If you have anything else, feel free to re-raise it. And again, I want to draw everybody's attention to the raise hand function at the bottom right of your screen. The next question in the chat is, a safe bike to the communities north of New York Avenue and the tracks along Montana Avenue was one of the biggest gaps in the low-stress bike network in Ward 5. Can this project look at establishing that?
So the question is, can you repeat that for me?
Sure, yeah. So the question is, can the project look at establishing a safe bike to the communities north of New York Avenue, on the side of the tracks along Montana Avenue?
So this project specifically is not looking at that, but that's something we could consider in future projects. And we'll note that comment.
Okay. Is there any plan to extend bike access on New York Avenue to Costco?
Again, our project limits for this study are Florida to Bladensburg, but that's something we could explore if there are a continuation of this project.
Great, thank you, Jamie. And then we have have these studies referred to and coordinated with the mayor's office regarding the New York Avenue redesign?
So we have been working with the Office of Planning on their study on New York Avenue. I'm not sure if that's the one you're referring to. But
And if you have any follow-up, feel free to share. But thank you, Jamie.
we
And
have been coordinating with the Office of Planning for their study that takes place on the corridor.
okay. And then the next question is, did you consider removing car travel lanes to make space for improved bike and pedestrian facilities?
So in order for us to remove a travel lane, especially on a high capacity corridor like New York Avenue, that would require a fairly intensive traffic study. And we're currently not scoped for that in this phase of the project.
Thank you, Jamie. And I'm going to go back to the raised hands. Jamie, I do have one comment requesting that the code goes back up. I believe that's
Oh,
referring to
Yeah, I
the
can go
Title
back.
6 code. You can just go back for us and I'll go ahead and present the next person. You should be on muted, Tongue.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to follow up real quick on the access to the MBT. Jamie mentioned that there is currently access to the
I'm sorry, your audio is going out a bit.
Did you hear me now?
That's a little bit better.
Okay. I just wanted to follow up on Jamie's comment about the MBT access to the Tanner Park. Are we talking about going down to Florida and then Ackington Place and then, you know, basically making kind of like the extra turns to get to MBT and not like direct access from New York Avenue?
Yes.
And there's no plan to have direct access from New York Avenue.
Sorry, I'm still having a little bit of a hard time hearing you.
So there's no plan to have an elevator or some sort of direct access from New York Avenue.
Not at this point. No, we haven't fully explored that.
Thank you, Tongue. Do you have any follow-up, Tongue?
No, that's all.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put you back on mute. If you have any other questions, feel free to raise your hand or put them in the Q&A box. Okay, Jamie, next in the Q&A section is, will this trail connect through Ivy City?
So the project limits are what was shown on from Florida to Bladensburg. And I mean, it can connect Ivy City through existing and planned bike infrastructure on Mount Olivet and on Bladensburg.
Great, great, great. And then we have a question. Would it be possible to use the right-of-way at Union Street Northeast to build a ramp or connection to New York Avenue from the new apartment buildings there?
Chris, do you know the answer to that question?
I think what you're referring to there is that the rail right of way that runs from just north of Union Street behind the storage building there. So, and that then goes underneath, there's a tunnel under New York Avenue. That right of way is owned by the railroad and is part of the VRE midday storage project that is in the planning phases at the moment. And so it's not available to DDOT for use for this project.
Thank you, Chris. And again, I have another individual with their hand raised. So Connor, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you and you should be able to speak now.
Hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Hi, this is Connor Shaw. I'm Deputy Chief of Staff for Councilmember Parker, and also was involved in the last concept study. To follow up on a couple of questions, I think it's crucially important to connect both the south and the north sides, and currently the project as conceived, or the new alternative, is just using the existing bridge, which, if I'm not mistaken, is something like 6 feet on either side, which is very constrained. So either a protected connection to 4th Street, or the previous concept study explored a ramp on the north side of the bridge. Something like that is crucially important and needs to be a part of this project, not an afterthought. On the north and east side of the project, I want to reiterate that, you know, that bridge that's to the north of the intersection of Montana and New York Avenue is an extremely dangerous place for anybody who's not in a car. And it would be a great service to Ward 5 if this project could incorporate some improvements to access there. And that would be consistent with the objective of this project to connect to existing bike facilities. There is an existing bike facility on 18th Street Northeast, and the residents of that community are particularly starved of any investment at all by DDOT in bike facilities. And then finally, I just wanted to ask if there, you know, something that would be closer to the concepts developed last time would be a shared use path on the north side of New York Avenue that's a little bit wider than 10 feet, you know, 12 or 14 feet is a little bit closer to some of the modern or the newer trails that DDOT has been constructing throughout the city. 10 feet really feels a lot like a glorified sidewalk, to be honest. So I just question the value of spending $25 million on a trail project that isn't really delivering any of the real benefits of a trail. So I hope you keep those comments in mind as you move forward with the project.
Thank you very much. Peyton, I believe you're muted.
I was unmuted. I'm sorry. Thank you so much, Jamie. I'm going to stick with the hand raise right now. Joe Bishop Hinchman, I see you've had your hand raised for a while, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. And we should be able to hear you now.
Maybe not. Hello?
Yep, we got
Okay.
you.
Thank you, and thank you for your hard work on this so far. I'm the commissioner for 5F06 and the chair of the 5F Commission, which is at the south end of this project at Florida Avenue and New York Avenue. And I'll just, you know, I'm sorry, pile on and reiterate the importance of connection to direct connection to the MBT and to Union Market. You know, whatever the dollar amount, if it doesn't connect to those two things, it's not, or the juice isn't really worth the squeeze. And, you know, last time we at least had a concept of a direct ramp or elevator connection to the MBT that didn't involve kind of going through a building, through Tanner Park, around down Eckington Place, through the death-defying Wendy's intersection at Florida Avenue, and then across onto the railroad tracks, and then over the bridge. But something more direct. And if that's taken out, it feels like we're going backwards. So, you know, I think it's going to be tough to get community support for something that doesn't connect communities on either side of where this project is. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I hear that comment. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. And then Rohan, I know you've had your hand raised for a while, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. If you're ready to speak, we should be able to hear you now.
Hey, thanks for taking my question and for the meeting. Thank you, everyone. My question is regarding, I think you mentioned something about the mayor's initiative on the New York Avenue, and I shared a link up here as well that's part of the planning.dc.gov. So they have this vision framework, which they are talking about the PDR land use for the 3 mile of New York Avenue. Now, my question is, did you consider the PDR land use? That is my question one, because that's going to affect a lot of things. Like one of the commissioners mentioned, that's a glorified sidewalk, basically, because at a later date, you might have to readjust and would be very challenging given that you're adding a lot of landscaping trees on either side of that. The second question, you mentioned something about the right of way where the VRE is involved. And my concern is if that right of way is actually the right of way for FRA, the Federal Railway Administration Association, and that might be a completely different thing, because if they're waiting or for an approval for some federal grants and there is no federal money in say 5 years, you're just completely looking at a very a proposal that might not even work with the DC, and whatever the oversight of the federal government, the grants might be, that's I think you need to start with that. And I'm trying to understand if you actually Jacobs did that, and we are absolutely certain that that's not going to be an impediment moving forward on this. So if you can answer these two questions, that would be great.
Chris, could you answer that second question for Carolyn?
Yeah, I mean, I can answer the second question to some extent. I'm not aware of the funding sources that VRE are using for their midday storage project. The information that I know that is out there in the public, beyond where we have met with VRE to discuss what their progress is, they're actually very proactive in publishing their progress and anticipated schedule on their project website, which you can access. And they're showing completion of their project in 2033.
And for the first question, we will continue to work with the Office of Planning and make sure that their vision is able to align with this project.
Yeah, I guess my question was, if you did not include the PDR land use already, that might come across as an, that you might have to go through a whole new project. And I think some commissioner for some ANC mentioned that's why are we spending $50 million or $25 million of taxpayers' money when you'll be looking for a redesign in 5 years, because that's a 10-year initiative. So has this study included the PDR land use initiative? Because I'd like to understand that as well.
I'm not certain on that, so I can get back to you on that question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Rohan. And then while we have one more hand raised, Mr. Mark Galvin, I see you, and I'm going to go ahead and unmute you if you're ready to talk. We should be able to hear you now. Okay, they went back on mute, so we can go back to the questions in the Q&A. From Commissioner Goodman, will there be improvements to the New York Avenue Bridge over the tracks for the pedestrian/bike facilities? Have you talked to MPS about connecting through their service yard for the trail to connect to New York Avenue to 6th Street?
We have not talked to them about that currently, but that is something we can look into, and I'll take that comment into consideration.
Great. And then Connor, I think you talked on this verbally, but could you please consider a 12 or 16-foot shared use path on the north side? Jamie, definitely a comment that we'll record. I think I heard mention of the north side. I'm sorry, I lost it with a new question. I think I heard mention of the north side of New York Avenue to the Arboretum. Can you provide details on that?
Mr. Carolyn, could you speak to that, please?
Yes, so to connect down to the Arboretum, obviously the most direct route is Montana Avenue. And so the project doesn't propose improvements on with a shared use facility along Montana Avenue, connecting to the neighborhood there, which are fairly low stress streets. And so it would be an on-street bike facility to the Arboretum. DDOT, as Jamie mentioned earlier in this presentation, are working on a Bladensburg project, which does include improvements to those crosswalks on Bladensburg Avenue, and so that would allow users of that facility on Montana Avenue to get across Bladensburg to that neighborhood more safely.
Thank you, Chris. And then Jamie, I have one more question. How does the proposed design anticipate for additional housing and future residents along New York Avenue as part of the New York Avenue corridor plan currently under the Office of Planning study?
Just again, their project, that study is fairly far out, but we are working with them and to ensure that their vision doesn't conflict with our project.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then I see Commissioner Kapoor, I see your hand is raised. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. We should be able to hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
To what degree will the connection to Florida Ave interact with the ongoing work at the Florida Ave, New York Ave junction, which we affectionately call Dave Thomas Circle? And relatedly, to what degree is redesign of Montana Circle, the virtual circle at the intersection of Montana, West Virginia, and New York Ave, to what degree is that in scope?
I think this project is a couple years out, so it wouldn't directly conflict with the Dave Thomas Circle construction, but.
Hey, Jamie, this is Ed.
Go ahead,
Let me
Ed, yeah.
try to answer that a little bit for you. We are anticipating kind of a corollary effort that will really look at the entire North Capitol Street corridor. As everyone said, that this effort really looks at New York Avenue from the curb out, and the effort that we're contemplating is really going to look at the entirety of New York Avenue, especially from the curb in. That means the travel lanes, the traffic operational impacts as well, the multimodal aspect. There was a study done by our transit delivery division about 2 years ago that looked at the land use, housing, future residents, etc. And it was basically a feasibility study that wanted to determine if New York Avenue had the capacity for BRT. And the study basically, it was a chicken and the egg kind of effort. It basically said we have to have, and WMATA and our transit delivery division basically came up with the conclusion that we have to have the land use, the housing first before a BRT can be considered. But to get to your point, we will really look at our next corollary effort. We'll look at the entirety of New York Avenue, I think from Dave Thomas Circle to the Maryland line.
Great. Thank you, Ed. And then we have a comment and a question. I think New York Avenue should eventually be able to accommodate an express bus route towards the convention center. Will the design allow for a bus-only lane in the future?
So I think Ed essentially answered that question in his previous response.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Jamie. This is the effort that we will be looking at next. Really, we'll look at the entirety of New York Avenue, travel lanes, potential for buses, etc. But I do need to remind everybody that the way WMATA works and is basically and DDOT is that we have to have the residents, the land uses, in the near term in place before we can actually operate a high capacity transit system.
Thank you, Ed. And Mr. Galvin, I see you're back. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, and we should be able to hear you now.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yep, gotcha.
Okay, great. No, I was just wanted to reiterate what Commissioner Bishop Henchman and Connor Shaw mentioned earlier. I really think it's of critical importance that we connect the MBT directly to the new trail. I know there's some space on the north side of New York Avenue to build a ramp there. With all the capacity and certainly with all the additional electric bike usage, that I think we're going to get a lot more people willing to take that direct route if there is access there. So I just wanted to reiterate some of their points. We've talked about it at length. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much. For those of us who came late, will the presentation deck be available later? I can answer that actually, yes, it'll be available on the project website. Just give us about a week or so to get it up, and the presentation as a whole will be on there. For the connection from Union Place, it's disappointing though understandable that the tunnel is off the table. However, there's a lot of land for a ramp up if it goes through the PNC Bank site. Is this being considered?
To my knowledge, we haven't looked into that ramp specifically, but we can speak after, like Chris and I can speak after this meeting and take a look at that.
Okay. Thank you, Jamie. And then Jamie, real quick, if you wouldn't mind just moving a slide forward to the project website and email so that people can record it. I noticed a few people hopped off. I want to make sure that they know where to send their comments to. And as Jamie mentioned before, you will have the opportunity to share comments on the Title VI form, as well as through the project email, which is on your screen right now. For those of you that have called in, if you do have any comments, you can send it to newyorkavenue.streetscape@dc.gov. Sorry, I didn't want to jump away, but I wanted to make sure that those who are still here were able to record that. Back to the questions and comments. No more bike lanes until we can find a way to penalize them for not following the law. We also need to find a way to register bikes. We are doing all this work and they pay nothing for these projects. Car owners pay for tags, registration. So what about bikes? Pay something too. Okay. Thank you for that comment. I am on West Virginia Avenue, and when the emergency apparatus came through at rush hour, they have a hard time passing through at rush hour. I have seen the ambulance go in the alley to get through.
So I will just say that this project is a shared use facility, so it's not solely for cyclists. And it also is completely outside of the curb, so it wouldn't impact the travel lane at all.
Got it. That's it right now in the Q&A. Mr. Galvin, I see your hand is still raised. I'm going to lower it temporarily. If you do have a new comment, feel free to raise it again, and I can unmute you. I just don't know if that was old. Gotcha. I'm unmuting you now.
All right, that was my mistake. Apologies.
Okay. Mr. Shaw, I can go ahead and unmute you.
Great. I was going to ask about, with the advantage of an off-street trail on the north side, in part, was that it would be basically uninterrupted by vehicle traffic. If we're doing shared use paths on either side, what is going to be the plan to control turning vehicles? Are we talking about signalized right-hand turns and left turns in different phases, or is this just really sidewalks that are being called shared use? Because any outside of central business district, every sidewalk is a shared use path, right? So I'm just trying to understand if this is still a trail project, what are the features of this that make it a recreational facility suitable for people of all ages?
Chris, I think you can go into a little more detail on this, but I know at some of the intersections to prevent vehicular conflict, we were talking about pavement markings or other interventions.
Yes, that's right. And that's some of the concepts we looked at on the south side. You're absolutely right. On the south side, there are driveways all along this corridor, and on the north side, there just aren't. It is a real nice, clear shot. I've ridden it myself a number of times, obviously, as part of this project. Whether it's a separated bike facility from the pedestrian facility on the north side, I don't think changes the number of conflict points there are with driveways or roadways. Those conflict points are there whether it's separated or not. So I don't think that is part of the discussion here, or that changes anything. In terms of the width of what we're proposing here, 10 feet, it is very similar to what a large proportion of the Met Branch Trail is. It's wider than the Mount Vernon Trail, and so it is. It does meet those standards, and pedestrians and bikes can coexist in those areas, and so that's why we've looked at that as the width. But this is all good comments, and we're here to listen.
Thank you, Chris. And again, I don't have any new. Oh, okay, one more hand raise. Commissioner Henchman, we should be able to hear you now.
Yeah, just everyone's beating up on you guys, so I feel like I should say, we do appreciate the hard work on this, and I will say that, if this is something that does have some of these connections, you have a lot of champions on this call that are going to fight for whatever the dollar cost of it is. We want to see this succeed. I know you want to see it succeed, so I hope you take it in a constructive manner, because if we do have some of that stuff in it, a lot of people are going to fight to make sure this is prioritized. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, we appreciate the support, but certainly all the comments that we've received, especially about connectivity to the Met Branch Trail, those are certainly valid, and we'll look into that. But we appreciate the support. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I see nothing new in the oh, I'm sorry, there is a new one. The intersection at New York and Fairview has a very long wait time for pedestrians when they push the signal to cross New York Avenue. Is there a chance to reduce the wait time to help prioritize pedestrians needing to access the north side of the avenue?
That's something that's not currently part of this project, but we can talk to our traffic engineering division and explore options for that.
Nothing new. We can give it a few more moments to see if anything else comes through. Ms. Morton, again, your comments have been taken into consideration. I do encourage you to, if you have any more comments, please share them when you fill out the Title VI form, or again, via the project email. Again, that email is newyorkavenue.streetscape@dc.gov.
Peyton, is that just wanted to let everyone know we will take your questions and provide answers, and we'll put the questions and responses on the web as well. So give us 2-3 weeks for that, but we will definitely respond in writing and your questions and put that on the web.
Rohan, I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to. Our attachment is going to be considered as comments sent through emails. I would like to mark up with my comments.
You mean mark up the plan set or the concepts? If so, yes, we would consider those as comments.
Great, thank you, Jamie, and thank you, Rohan. I don't see anything new coming through. I'm just want to check the chat and make sure I'm not missing anything. Thank you, Commissioner Henchman. If there's no new questions, I'm trying to make sure there's no hands being raised. Oh, Commissioner Kapoor, I see you. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to echo what Commissioner Bishop Henchman said, that we are all very eager to see this trail connect to more things. Going back to what I said, if like the virtual circles themselves are outside of scope and it's a later phase in a later project, and if connectivity across New York Ave down to the MBT and to other bike infrastructure is a later phase or something that we anticipate being done as part of plan unit developments as the OP project moves forward, or the changes that the OP report will move forward. I think we can all get behind that too and get excited. I just maybe a little bit more clarity on the anticipated timelines and interactions with those projects is something that'd be great to hear. And then just so that we can then start advocating for that. Thanks.
Thank you.
I guess if there's no further questions, we can end the meeting.
Agreed, Ed. I'm not seeing anything new, so I think that concludes tonight's meeting. Again, if you have any further comments or questions, please email us or fill them out during the Title VI survey. Again, the email is newyorkavenue.streetscape@dc.gov, and the project website is nyave.dot.dc.gov.
Thank you all
Hey,
very
thank
much
you.
for being here.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good one.